All right, everybody. I am super excited. I have a special guest here in Bourbon Barry's Cocktail Lounge. So I'm going to have Allie introduce herself.
Why, thank you so much, Barry. My name is Allie Klug. I am the East Region brand ambassador for all things James B. Beam Distilling, which is a lot, I think a lot more than people realize. Um, Jim Beam, obviously, Booker's, Baker's, Knob Creek, Basil Hayden, and Overholt.
Overholt, which is what we're going to talk about. We're going to focus on Overholt today.
Yes.
So what have you brought to my home today? These beautiful bottles.
All right, so we've got Old Overholt, which is our classic, everyone's kind of standby. Although we did over the last few years put the 4-year age statement on the bottle, which is kind of like a newer moment. But so we've got a 4-year Old Overholt. Can I touch it?
Absolutely, it's your
ooh,
bottle.
With our classic Abe Stern, we're saying Stern face on the front. So Abe is actually the founder of the Overholt family. So in 1810, which is crazy to think about, 1810, he was 26 years old. He inherited his family's business. So in 1810, Abe gets his family business. He's 26 years old, which is wild, thinking about what I was doing when I was 26. It wasn't...
Last year.
You're so sweet. It wasn't running my family business. He was operating the whiskey production out of West Overton, and he takes over, and it's just this is it. This is what I want to do. His nephew and another family member, a few years later, actually produce a larger distillery, and they move production to that larger distillery.
Is this in Kentucky or Pennsylvania?
I'm so sorry, you're right. This is Pennsylvania.
Right.
So if you look at all of our bottles for Overholt, it says born in Pennsylvania, made in Kentucky. So all of this production started in Pennsylvania. And if you think about, as we started to develop this country, everyone was moving to the East Coast because that was where they were finding land,
right,
and developing colonies there. At this point, we're trying to figure out the structure of our country, what that looks like, and what you have available in the Pennsylvania, Maryland area, because Pennsylvania and Maryland didn't exist at that time, but that's the region you're looking at, is rye.
Right.
Rye is actually a grain that thrives in a stressed out environment. So the cold and the wind really is beneficial. So the more,
really?
Yeah, it's similar to grapes, right? So when grapes are being grown for specifically wine, they actually do better in a nutrient deficient soil. They want to just have to the harder they work, the deeper they have to push their roots down, and they grow down, and actually the better growing season they have. So rye is very similar in that sense. So that's why Canada is so well known for having beautiful rye grain, because that bitch is cold. right
Never really thought about that before. Yeah.
And being on the actual coast, you have that higher wind, as we all know as New Yorkers.
Right. So you've got these. So we're talking about, let's say, early 1700s, right? So you have these farmers. They're growing the grains. Obviously, they're using them for food. They're using them for commerce. But they're also having excess grains that they're at some point turning into some kind of distilled spirit.
Yeah.
That they're using as not only to consume, but they're also using as currency, right?
And medicinal and currency, yeah.
Right.
So because we still had a huge bartering system at that point.
Right.
In terms of how people were interacting. So it's I have this for this versus versus the money.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right, which really didn't exist because, I guess maybe at that point it was still British currency, right? So this was sort of this little side hustle that people were doing.
And it was most people, right? So a lot of people had stills on their property. It was just a question of whether or not you had a good reputation and the quality of of your product. And now we're going to use the version of quality back then is different than the version of quality now, right? We have all of these scientific and technical advances that we've made.
Right, Bottled and Bond Act obviously went a long way to, it was like the first sort of consumer protection law.
Yes.
Right, went a long way to make sure that
you
there
didn't
wasn't
want turpentine?
Listen, I mean, for medicinal purposes, right, but turpentine or methyl alcohol, people were going blind and dying. So that you sort of kind of went from like this free-for-all where it was kind of like, I don't know, it was bathtubs, but it was like the backwoods kind of thing to sort of having a product. All right, so now where does Mr. Overholt fit into this picture?
So we're going to go back, because actually it's so interesting that you bring up the Bottled and Bond Act. That's a huge pillar within the Overholt family, but that is 1897. So so in 1810, 26 gets the family business, and really whiskey is his focus. Again, his nephew and another family member build a different location, I think about 5 or 6 years later. They move production from West Overton to this larger facility because they have these dreams of expansion, right? They
want to Western PA.
Yes. So West Overton is closer to Pittsburgh than it is to Philly. Gotcha. Right? So you would be in that area. I want to say it's about 45 minutes to an hour out. And actually, we've, as a company, have worked really closely with West Overton and with Pennsylvania to now have it be a historical landmark.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And we're renovating and working that space into a museum and a tourism space for this whole history and the beginning and honoring of Overholt, because it is actually the oldest, longest running American whiskey. There are people that might say, oh, no, it's another company, but that's talking about bourbon versus American whiskey as a whole, right? So, and rye has about 3 decades on bourbon in terms of existing before anyone started to move towards Kentucky and start to work with corn as a grain versus rye as a grain, right?
Right. All right, so 1810 he acquires this company, and then they move the distillery, and at this point, are they successful as a business?
Absolutely. And that's why, like, the dreams of expansion weren't fodder. It was a reality of, like, meeting the demand of the fact that, like, they have a good reputation as a family, as a company. Now we're looking at this company as a Overholt family, right? That's what Abraham's calling it. For their product and for just them as a business.
Gotcha.
And that's a huge part of it too, because there were so many people that had stills and that were making things just kind of because it was currency.
Yeah.
Not only are you looking at, is it a good brand, but like, do the people in your neighborhood trust you?
Right.
Do they want what you're making? Do they? And part of I say we because I'm totally that person, like, watching the football game and you're like, go us. But like, I actually am a part of the company, but like, I wasn't a part of this, clearly. If anyone could guess, I wasn't born in 1810. We were one of the first people to actually join the Bottled and Bond Act in 1897. And have continued that to today. Like, so our bonded Old Overholt is very much a pillar within our family of whiskeys that are available. So, like, obviously we don't need that anymore because, like, it's no longer just, like, a random barrel with God only knows what's in it. We know that what's going inside of it is a good quality product, but, like, the standards of Bottled and Bond are really, are really a privilege to uphold. Because, it has to be 4 years old. It has to be 100 proof. Like, you're still working within those bonded warehouses and everything like that. And, like, I think it's one of the best values on the market. So, in actuality, we don't need to continue to do it. But, of course, we want to because it's a huge part of our history. Yeah.
And, I just came back from Kentucky. And, we were talking before we started rolling about, this sort of this marriage of, like, this new technology. But there's still the tradition and the history that's really important. All right, so at some point, because now obviously this is now under the James Beam company. Is that the
James B. Beam? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, James. So how did
How did we get there?
How'd you get there?
So at some point we lose Abraham because unfortunately we don't all live for forever. And the company stays under family management, but after we lose Abraham, his grandson buys the company for $1, but his name is Henry Clay Frick. Now, a lot of people are like, okay, I know that name.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say Frick, it's Frick Museum.
Right.
It's exactly who you think it is. It's
Mm-hmm.
exactly the family you think it is. So Henry is Abraham's grandson. He buys the company for $1, and he pulls in a business partner whose name is Andrew Mellon.
Oh, so frickin' Mellon. So at this point, I have to change my hat.
Yeah.
Because now we're talking about Pittsburgh
Yeah.
history here. So my son went to Pitt, so you can't go anywhere without seeing the name Mellon or the name Frick. Yeah.
So obviously Mellon being a banker at the time, and they are taking over this production. Why that's super important is not because we just want to throw around the name Andrew Mellon, but because Andrew Mellon becomes the Secretary of Treasury during Prohibition, or like he holds this position while Prohibition is happening.
Mm-hmm.
So he is able to get pretty easily a medicinal production license for Overholt. So at no point does production ever stop.
And Overholt is still a Pennsylvania company at this point?
Still a Pennsylvania company at this point.
Gotcha.
It doesn't move. So after Prohibition is when the stakeholder changes, and it moves to a different gentleman who runs a company called National Distillers. And post-Prohibition, this company owned about 50% of liquid in America.
Oh, wow, yeah.
That was available for consumption, or like that was noted on paper. Because we all know there is definitely a bunch that didn't exist.
Right.
Exist. And post-Prohibition is when production moves. So National Distillers had a distillery in Kentucky, in Frankfort, Kentucky. So Frankfort is, if you're looking at Louisville, because that's kind of everyone's general like
North Star
of Kentucky, right? You're going a little southwest, and it is like tucked right into the river.
Mm-hmm.
I actually, when I look at it, I like look at an aerial shot of it and I call it my little whiskey castle because it looks like it's a moat and you're like going over this moat and it's like, look, all of this view. Because there are still to this day, it's no longer a distillery. It's now a bottling and aging facility. But there's still all of this like old whiskey on there and you're just like, ooh, like what's hidden in like the cracks. So National Distillers is now running this production. At the time, they are doing Old Overholt, Old Grandad, Old Taylor, and Old Crow.
Okay.
And it's a lot of time, which is kind of crazy. But in 1987 is actually when Beam comes in.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was relatively recent. Yeah.
You know, it's so funny to say that, but like in actuality, it's like 37 years, right?
Yeah, it's like, well, when you get to be my age, it seems relatively recent.
Well, it freaks me out because I'm like, oh wow, I remember this really easily because of the year I was born, which I'm not telling any of you what it is.
That's why she's 27 and I'm not.
I'm not 27, but I love you. So that is when that happens. So Beam takes on Overholt, Old Crow, and Old Grandad, and we sold off Old Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the reason why all of that is not under our purview.
Gotcha.
When we purchased the Frankfurt facility, is when we stopped production on that site, and then changed it over to a bottling facility and continued and kept the warehouses on the property.
Gotcha. Is it been the same recipe like all along? Yeah. What is the recipe? I'm
So,
actually dying to taste this.
It's
I can't wait any longer.
let's start drinking.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't know what.
Well, I don't
what
know
took
what
you
we
so
were
long?
waiting for. It hasn't been the same recipe. So when it was being made in Pennsylvania, kind of what we talked about a little bit earlier, is like the grains that were available there was rye.
Mm-hmm.
So rye was what was being used. Once production moved to Kentucky, so we're not the people that changed the recipe.
Mm-hmm.
National Distillers is who changed it to more of a Kentucky style rye. So when people talk about rye, the main two avenues that they discuss is a Pennsylvania style rye versus a Kentucky style rye.
Right.
Pennsylvania style rye being sans corn, because corn wasn't
Available.
which is kind of wild because I grew up in New Jersey and like Jersey corn is so good. But it's a different state and area and world.
Right. Wasn't so easy to truck it in 1810.
Yeah, the options weren't
PA,
quite
right?
there. So this is now what you're getting is a Kentucky style rye, meaning that there is a decent amount of corn in the mash bill, which changes viscosity, which changes texture and viscosity the same, changes sugar content, changes fermentation,
Right.
which then it's a domino effect, right? Which changes distillation, which changes your end product, changes how it interacts across the board with everything, right?
Right.
Because the two big differences between the grains is going to be that corn is like a simple sugar versus rye being a complex sugar. So what is needed for fermentation and distillation is different because those sugars are interacting differently because it's single chain, multi-chain,
Gotcha.
right?
Right.
And then the other really big thing being, so not only mash bill, then you're also looking at like a different aging environment, right? The two climates are very different. And the biggest thing being that when we purchased them, we're now using our yeast strain. So we have two. One of the biggest parts of that purchase was for the old Granddad yeast strain, which we used for Basil Hayden. But we only have the two, and we only use the two proprietary ones. So the other being our Jim Beam yeast strain, which Jim Beam caught in 1935 in his back windowsill because, like...
Oh, really?
Yeah, because why not, right? Like,
Jeez.
It's crazy to think about...
It's better than saying, it was like toe jam or something like that.
Ooh. I mean, it's just crazy to think about, like, how much is actually, like, in the air constantly around us all the time. And yeast is one of those things, which is wild, which is why we're able to have things that, like, are naturally, like fermentation happening naturally versus us, like, needing to add it to kickstart it to happen, right? So the same thing with your sourdoughs.
Right. So this is the same yeast strain that you would use for Booker's or Baker's or anything else. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Or any of the Beam core products, right?
So the only thing that we use the old Granddad yeast strain on is Old Granddad and Basil Hayden. That's it. And then everything else we use our Jim Beam yeast strain on.
I did not know that.
Yes.
Yeah. There you go.
And for me personally, I think it is a distinct quality. I think it shows up differently in all of our brands, but I always find it to have like some form of like a nutty moment, which like expresses itself differently depending on our mash bill, and then also like for every product we have different distillation parameters and different like aging parameters.
Those dogs are doing something.
Is that the dogs?
Yeah, I that's trouble, but we'll deal with that later.
I can't wait to smush their faces when we're done with this.
If they're not punished for eating my pillow, whatever they're doing upstairs.
Maybe a shoe.
Probably a shoe.
R.I.P. that shoe.
Hey, leave that shoe alone. All right, so what do we have here? What are the notes that you get on this Kentucky rye?
I mean, to not to like beat a dead horse, but like I immediately get those super classic traditional high toned spices, right? Because like it's not a warm spice, it's not a sweet spice, and like that's, I usually say high tone when I'm talking about like, because I don't want to say sharp, because I feel like sharp people have like a negative connotation when they hear that word. So it's not sharp, but it's just like high toned and it's like zippy, like a very zippy rye, where that's that like that firm cracked black pepper moment.
Right. It's funny, in my mind I always like describe that as kind of like bright. I don't know whatever bright means,
Yeah,
but it's like
it's the same mentality of like what I'm like. It's in the same way that's hard to specify like acid, right? Like acid is bright. It gives it that kind of gives it that backbone that all the other flavors get to then hang on to and play off of and expand off of, right? So for me, that rye is is like the spinal cord of all the other flavors that kind of shooting off of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, got
the
it.
way that I describe things is weird. My brain is weird.
No, but it makes sense. I think like you try to paint that word picture. I think it's it does make sense.
Now we are using a char 4 barrel for this. So what that means, right? On average, you're looking at about 55 seconds of just flaming hot fire right into the center of that barrel. That process is so cool to watch. And I think my coworkers get concerned about me because they're like, you're a little bit of a pyro. And I'm like, absolutely. Like, it's just so fun to see it. But what that does, that amount of heat for that amount of time, and I know 55 seconds doesn't seem like a lot, but it's very long compared to the other char levels. That's breaking down those wood sugars, and it's caramelizing them, and it's changing the way that the liquid interacts with the wood and the flavors that you get out of it. Now, this is a 4-year-old whiskey, which compared to like a Knob Creek seems like not a lot of time, because Knob Creek's in there for 9 years, but 4 years is a really perfect amount of time for that liquid to be able to continue to try and push through that char filtration and get to all of those caramelized notes, right? So, and I think that those caramelized notes hang tightly to that corn really well.
Yes.
And so it's
absolutely.
taking that corn and it's bumping that corn up. So you have that like spicy, zippy, bright pepper that's now kind of intertwining into, for me personally, I get this really beautiful like sweet cornbread moment on the mid palate, but never losing that spice. That's just me.
No, I'm with you on that. It's maybe also one of the things that I like. One of the first ryes that I actually liked was Knob Creek rye, because I think at 51% rye, I still could get like a lot of the bourbon caramels and vanillas and things, and I think I think that was a good jump for me. But I don't know how much corn there is, but I think this is the same thing. It's like if you gave this to me and said it was a high rye bourbon, I wouldn't think twice. So it doesn't hit you over the head with like some of the things actually that I don't care for are like that dill, licorice, celery thing. Like I know some people do, but I think maybe as a bourbon guy, I still kind of lean more towards the sweeter notes, and I think this has a great balance because you definitely still get the rye in there too.
It's so funny you say dill, because dill is actually a natural characteristic of American oak. So that when you get those notes, that's more often coming from your barrel versus
from the rye,
your liquid. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Me being
this is good.
A pickle lover, I'm into it.
I don't have any pickle juice. I guess we could be doing some of those.
Oh my goodness!
shots,
like
but,
drinking responsibly, I do happen to love to chase an Overholt with some pickle juice, but clearly doing it in a moderate, responsible fashion.
Always, of course, always. And I know that you have a designated driver here today.
I sure do.
And I'm not going anywhere, so
Thanks,
that's
Ted.
perfectly fine. This is really good. I like this a lot. And it's probably one of those ones that I've seen a million times. And the price point, at least in New York, I think is very
across the board, it's very reasonable.
Retails around...
Oh, that's a Ted question.
We've got the around 20-ish something, or a little bit more, a little less.
Yeah, it should be around $22.99.
Yeah, $22.99.
Early 20.
And listen, there's that psychology too. Like you walk along and you see things on the lower shelf, and you think, But I gotta tell you, this
I
is
love the quality of this.
Super solid, and this is good as a sipper. I think at 100 proof, right? Is that what it is?
No, this is at 86.
86. I
The
think
bond sits at 100.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I think like if you don't think you like rye, or if you don't know what rye tastes like, I mean, Knob Creek I think is also another good place to go. But I think at 100 proof, maybe this one's sort of like a better gateway because it's just so it's smooth. We hate that word, but it is.
What does smooth mean?
Honestly, I think smooth means that you don't get a lot of ethanol. I mean, I think there's like I think for someone who's like for people who are aficionados, they kind of like they don't like that word. But I think if you're new at this, it means that you can drink it without feeling like you're drinking molten lava. So that's what I think of smooth.
There's a reason why this is such a like whiskey drinkers like and trade and bartenders darling bottle, right? It's a great thing to at the end of your shift or end of your day, or regardless of what that shift is. It's an easy thing to grab and drink where like you're not worried about like, is this a special moment? Like, where did I get this? How much did I pay for this? But like the quality is there. And I think that's one of the things that I love about our distillery in general is that like there is a range of items that is made for every moment, for every feeling, for every mood, for whatever you're looking for, and for whatever like your price point is in that time, because that changes. Like, are you saving for a vacation? Okay, then you're not buying the $200 bottle of like allocated whatever.
Right.
That's a huge price range. But like it all like everything sits somewhere within that space, right? And this is just for me like one of my favorite things to do is like even before I ever had this job is to like walk into a bar with my friends and be like, oh, we're all doing a round of Overholt, right? Yeah. Like, and that's before we order anything else.
Right, but I mean, I certainly don't, I wouldn't say this is like, oh, you have to have a cheap mixer on your bar. I don't think, this is...
You don't have to mix it.
It's really good. It's got a ton of flavor. It's funny because I still get that like bit of like that beam kind of nuttiness, but there's some sweetness here, which maybe on some other products I haven't gotten, but this I think this is really good.
It's very balanced.
Delicious. I think for the price point, you should have this on your bar. I think that again, you don't have to necessarily think of this. I think it'd be fine in a cocktail, but I think this is it's a nice sipping whiskey.
I love Overholt in an Old Pal. Like it's one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite classics.
Old Pal, I don't even know what that is. Meanwhile, I'm eyeing this one.
Oh yeah. Well, we're jumping off the rails, like there's nothing in between for these two. But an Old Pal
That's what I'm all about.
A rye cocktail, with whatever your rye is, and I usually always go Overholt, and then dry vermouth, and Campari. So
interesting.
Not necessarily equal parts the way you would with like a Boulevardier, but you could if you want. Like you can make anything the way you want. Like it's about you're drinking it, right? But it's switching out that dry vermouth versus a sweet vermouth, which for me, I'm super into.
Maybe because again, I think maybe the sweet vermouth is for people. Not that you can enjoy the drink, but maybe.
Absolutely.
Like I think someone invented the old fashioned because they probably like needed to sweeten up the whiskey a little bit.
The whiskey at the time was like not as palatable as what we have now.
So let's put some sugar in there.
That's why Rockin' Rye exists.
Yeah, exactly.
It's because the rye was like undrinkable.
Right.
And so they added the rock candy sugar.
Right, but I like that idea of the dry vermouth. It's funny. I've actually substituted Aperol for Campari.
Sure.
That Campari, that bitterness sometimes is a little bit like it depends on my mood, but I happen to like the Aperol because I think it's just the orange and a little bit more of that sweetness kind of like to me just makes it a little bit more of like maybe on a warm day kind of thing.
That's the beauty of this world, right? Is like you get to drink
it how you like it, right?
Drink it how you like it, right? Yeah. It's about you. It's about your experience. The way you drink something has no effect on me at all whatsoever. I'm not drinking it for you. You're drinking it.
Exactly.
And the beauty, and then now we have so much innovation, so much available to us that like there's a million other options other than Campari and Aperol that you can choose. So you're just kind of like, okay, find the thing that you like, and go with it.
Love it. All right, so I am super excited. So now let's talk about this because this is something that's pretty a new release, right?
So this is.
Yeah, I'll let you.
Sure.
Show that bottle.
You like,
tell us a little
I
bit
like
about.
to do that. Ooh, right. So this is a single release, right? So there was, I believe, 168 cases of this made, and that's all she wrote, my friend.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That bottle may have to not necessarily leave the premises at the end here. I'll just be like, oh, I don't know where the bottle went.
I think the dog took it.
Yeah.
So in the 1960s, a lot of the warehouses that were constructed on our property, now we're talking about our Claremont property. So Claremont, Kentucky is where the majority of our distillation is done. It's a straight shot down from Louisville, about 30 minutes. So actually pretty accessible if you're ever in Kentucky and like on that Bourbon Trail vibe. Like I highly recommend. Our facility is beautiful. The experience is great. Like it's just, Kentucky is just beautiful.
Kentucky's beautiful.
And we're right on the edge of the Bernheim Forest as well.
Yep, drove right past it last week.
Such a stunning view.
Yeah.
And so we've had that property since the 1920s. So Jim Beam himself is who moved our facility there without knowing that Prohibition was going to happen. And Prohibition was very much treated like the way that we treated COVID, right? Like people did not think that it was going to last the way that it did. They're like, oh, okay, this old tired tale.
Interesting.
I don't know if that's the way that they phrase that, but we were not able to, obviously, James B. Beam did not hold a medicinal license. So we were we had the property, we were not able to use it until 1934. Because, fun fact, Prohibition was not repealed in Bullitt County until a year later than the rest of the country.
Really?
Yeah. So Bullitt County.
I had no idea.
Yeah, Bullitt County got their ability to distill a year later than everyone else, because who knows what the government is thinking at any time.
Interesting. Yeah, I had no idea.
And since then, we've only expanded and grown. So in the 1960s, the majority of the warehouses on the property were elevator warehouses. So what that means is it is technically one floor, whereas when you talk about other warehouses and it's a rick house, right? You're talking about 7 to 9 floors, right?
Right.
So an elevator warehouse is technically one floor with about 18-ish levels. Oh, no, there's 18 ricks across, and then there's usually 10 to 12 levels within the space. So you're getting 18 barrels across, and then there is a guy hooked in for safety on this little kind of orange platform elevator that's taking them to whatever level they want to be on, but it's technically considered one floor, as opposed to trotting up those old old levels, which is such a cute journey. So this particular warehouse that these barrels are coming from is Warehouse V, and it has a great view, I gotta say, of our property. And this warehouse is actually not long for this world. It's gonna get torn down. And as they were moving the barrels, they were like, wait a minute, and realized that there was some really, really special liquid.
Really? That's crazy.
Isn't it so funny how life works? Because it was never this intention of being we're gonna do this bottling, but as they were removing, and I sent you some photos. So the photos of the warehouse, they're pretty empty. There's not a ton of barrels. So some of them were being used for this production, and then some of them we're just getting relocated because it's just not the 1960s, man. I mean, so this particular warehouse was raised in 1965, and then it's unfortunately going to go bye-bye. So sorry, buddy.
But it's amazing how many stories of they're someone finds these honey barrels, or the larceny story. There's so many stories that it's just kind of
if you think about it,
just happened organically.
80 some odd years of product, like you're gonna forget about a couple barrels here or there or whatever. But this is on the bottle. It's 10 years old, but it's like 10 years old and like 11 months. So it's actually a little bit closer to 11 years, but not officially 11 years old. And this is cask strength. So it is just barrel dump bottle, right? And
121 proof.
Mm-hmm. She's not shy.
No. And same mash bill?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the same liquid. It's just cask strength and older.
All right. So tell me what, as a professional person in the whiskey.
The dog is so interested, and I love every second of it.
Velcro, there she is.
She's like, I want to smell the whiskey. Yeah. She's so cute.
So it's same recipe, cask strength, 121 proof. So what, do you get anything different here than you did on the standard issue?
So here's the thing when you talk about a higher alcohol content, right? So why do people do that? Why do they raise proofs? Why do we do cask strength? Like why do products like this exist? Mm-hmm. When you talk about alcohol, I like to always attribute it to similar to like salt in cooking, that it's like a flavor binder and enhancer. Now, that with that in tow, you still have that high ethanol content. So getting past that ethanol when you get to the final product, and then to get to all that flavor that it is binding and enhancing, right? So that's always kind of like the quandary. One of the ways to do that, as we all know, is water. So water helps burst that ethanol compound and allow the other flavors to come forward. But what you can also do is something called the Kentucky Chew. So the Kentucky Chew was a big Booker No moment. So Booker being our 6th generation master distiller at James B. Beam, and like just such a like warm, beautiful man that did nothing but elevate the world of whiskey, right? It's like I don't know if there's anyone out there that doesn't like honor and respect that man within our industry. So Booker liked to talk about the Kentucky Chew, and what he would say is, you start with nosing your whiskey. You always want to have your mouth open a little bit because a lot of the flavors are also like olfactory through your nose and through smell. So you want that kind of opening your mouth allows that retro nasal moment to happen. And then when you take your sip, you want to have it. You want to make sure it's coating your whole mouth because your tongue and your mouth identifies different flavors differently. You swallow, smack your lips, and blow out. So it's not a cute thing, but what that blowing out does, it allows that ethanol that's trapped in your mouth to get released so you can get more of those flavors. And it's very helpful when you're talking about high proof spirits, because allowing that extra ethanol to get released when you obviously want to try it cask strength first, right?
Right.
I want to try this as it is, and then I'll adjust as I go on how if I want to add ice, if I want to just add water, like. Right. But how are you gonna know if you don't try it as it is first?
All right. Cheers.
Are you gonna chew?
I'm gonna chew. I'll follow your lead.
It's not cute. It's never a cute thing.
Well, I'll follow your lead.
How used to high proof spirits I've gotten is maybe concerning to my mother.
That exhale thing actually,
it works.
It's a thing.
It's because it's science. It's not like, oh, I just want you to look stupid.
It's science.
We love science.
I love science.
I feel like this is that like on crack, right? In a positive way. Maybe I should rephrase. That.
No, we know what you mean. It's okay.
Yeah, it's like this Superman version of Overholt. What's crazy is the barrel dump being so spot on in flavor profile that like there was like no adjustment needing to be made. It was just such a kismet moment of like this is great, and there is a little bit of that anesthetic from the alcohol, right? So like my tongue is tingling a little bit regardless of the exhale or not. makes me feel alive.
Indeed, indeed.
um,
But I'll tell you something. This finish
is stunning.
It's still going on.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%.
It's
like
really oily. It
and
just coats my mouth.
That extra alcohol is adding to that. Oh, I should hit the microphone.
You good?
Is adding to that viscosity. It's adding to that mouthfeel. Yeah. When you talk about mouthfeel, I always have a food analogy, and I'm waiting for the moment that someone like calls me out on it, and they're just like, "Get into your shtick." But the way that I love to talk about body and mouthfeel, which I think like shouldn't be reserved for just wine, right? Like to have that conversation with other spirits. I like to attribute it to milk, right? So you have a skim milk, it's really thin, it's really light, and as you go to 1%, 2%, whole, half and half, there's a literal like coating and weight to it. So that's a similar way to attribute to.
It's a great analogy. It makes complete sense.
Thank you.
Because I remember when I started doing this, I'm like, yeah, mouthfeel.
Like, yeah, on, you're like, what is that?
Come on, man. This is a mouthfeel. But yeah, no,
You're just trying to make me say stupid shit.
Right. You go, ooh, yes, the mouthfeel is amazing. But honestly, this definitely, I mean, you can just feel like it's still like, it's like the roof of my mouth.
This is a whole milk jammer for me.
Coated with that oil.
She's there.
And I still taste it. It's actually, it's quite good.
I love it. But all of those flavors for me, right, are just like, we're still getting those really beautiful peppery notes. We're still getting that like caramelized cornbread that like, you know, I think about like my brother, he always makes cornbread for Thanksgiving and like we'll never stop. And just that like crusty, like crispy, like edge on it. Like that specific bite of the cornbread. It's kind of how actually, I feel about that.
You know, it's interesting. So when me and my buddies did a bunch of distillery tours, and when you walk, sort of as you're walking in, every one of them smells like a bakery.
Oh yeah,
and it's insane.
It's such a great smell, isn't it?
It's a great smell,
but it's everywhere.
It's like pumpernickel or like sourdough bread, super super strong, but once I got that, now I get that in the glass. Like now, now that I can identify that, like. Really, because again, people are going, it tastes like pretzel dough. I'm like, it does not taste like pretzel dough. But you can get it. You can get those bready.
And the nut on this one for me is kind of more of that like walnut. That's the nut I get with Overholt for me personally. And what is so interesting about tasting notes though is like it is so dependent on you as a person. Right? So, like, I'll never forget the first time someone said lychee as a tasting note to me, and I was like, I don't know what that is. I've never had one. I was, like, 21 years old, and I was like, I've never had a lychee. I don't know what you're talking about.
Last year. Yeah.
You're so sweet. I love you. But, so, like...
But you definitely get that, like, and I think maybe it comes in with that, like, oily thing, where that, like, nutty things, but it is not like the bean, like, peanut thing that you'll get in, like, let's say, the Booker's.
A Jim Beam White Label for me is straight street cart, like, nuts for nuts.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that for me is, like, so on point.
Yeah.
And, like, you know, like, my base idea, and then you go to Knob Creek, and that's more kind of, like a walnut pancake or, like, a pecan pancake moment, right? And, like, that kind of thing. So for here, like, it's still there, but it's expressing itself really differently. But what I think is so interesting and fun about tasting notes is that everyone's pulling from their own Rolodex of flavors you've experienced.
Exactly.
So
I even get a little citrus in here, like a little like orange peel, not orange.
Ooh, okay, get it.
But
get that
just
orange
like
peel.
that, like that, like orange zest kind of thing. Not so much on the taste, but on the aroma.
Is it more? It's more kind of like that, like charred orange, though. Like that. Yeah, for
like if
sure.
you're gonna have
it's
like a good like Sazerac or something like that, right?
It's not a freshie.
No. It's not like Valencia or anything like that. This is good. This is really good. I'm kind of hit. I mean, there's some ryes that I really like, and there's some that just don't hit me the same way. But this is definitely.
I'm glad that we make rye that you like. That brings me joy.
Yeah. So you're actually 3 for 3 because the Knob Creek, the old Overholt 4, and the Cask Strength are all 3 that definitely I would keep on my bar. They're really good.
This is out there.
Delicious.
You can find it, but there's just not a lot of it. So I would look for it now. If it's something that something that someone's interested in, I wouldn't wait.
So this is truly a limited run? Like this is like once it's gone, it's gone. Like you don't think that it's coming back.
It might come back as an older product because there might be some more barrels, but now the liquid's still in the barrel and it's even older.
Right.
So like this version of it is it.
See, I didn't know that either. I just figured this was like a new sort of like product in the lineup.
No, I mean, we do love our new innovations and our permanent, like, we're constantly expanding, and that is in part to Freddie No now being our 8th generation master distiller in tandem with his father Fred. There's a reason why his nickname is Little Booker, right? Has a very similar mentality to Booker, so he's constantly like pushing us forward and like, what can we do and how can we innovate? Because like having 229 some odd years of whiskey making heritage and experience is great, but like the moment that you think that you have it all figured out or there's nothing new to do is like the moment you're lost, right? And I'm so appreciative that we get to be under the lineage of this family that like is constantly working and constantly pushing and constantly just trying to be a part of this continued story.
Yeah, it's just like anything else, there's just so much more, behind, there's so much of this history behind the brand that it makes things taste better too. Like I think like understanding that the dedication of the people that are working on this. And
it's not just our master distillers, right? The people who've worked on these distillery properties, like we're on multiple generations of the people in the warehouses and out in the bottle on the bottling lines and like throughout the whole property. Like it's a really beautiful thing because they are so proud to be a part of the story as well. Like, and it's a real tribute to the fact that like this is not a marketing ploy. This is very much our distillery and our history and who we are as a company. Like it's really easy to sit in a room and try and think up something pretty, but when it's real, it's real. Yeah. And I love the fact that ours is real. Yeah. Like it makes my job so easy.
Absolutely. And again, I think that's why, like for me personally, like that, like this history, the whole history behind this, and this is going back hundreds of years, gives you just gives us, as the consumer, a deeper appreciation and respect, and it just kind of makes this overall, hobby, whatever you want to call it, that just more interesting because of that rich history that you get from these products.
And there's Abraham just being stern AF on every bottle.
Yeah, he kind of looks pissed.
It's so funny. There was like a conversation about like having him smile to make it more approachable.
Nah, it's good.
And people were like, no. We like his little. Listen, he was making whiskey at 26 years old in 1810. How much are you smiling?
It takes a tough man to make a delicious whiskey, right? But that's badass. Listen,
so
Allie,
his face actually got put on the bottle in 1888, so after his passing.
It's a great tribute. Obviously, just like your old granddad too. Allie, I can't thank you enough for coming here and sharing all this information and sharing a pour.
Heck yeah! Thank you for having me.
Which is just I would say it's the best part, but it was all the best part. But this history, enlightening more about the company, about the heritage. Again, I think that for myself and for our viewers, I think it's just great stuff. And again, I can't thank you enough.
Oh, I love doing it. I'm so happy to be here.
It's great stuff. And let's raise a glass.
Heck yeah.
To Abraham Overholt.
Abraham.
Wherever you are up there, cheers.